Hello and welcome to the Hotspotting podcast, where we bring you the latest and hottest trends in the world of real estate. Each week, we'll bring you insights and analysis from industry experts, as well as real-life stories from homeowners and investors to help you make informed decisions relating to real estate. From the bustling capital cities to the thriving regional centres, we'll take you to the hottest locations in Australia to identify rising markets primed for investment. So subscribe today and never miss an episode. And now, here's your host of today's show, Tim Graham.
Hello and welcome everybody. I'm excited to have Warren Livesey as our special guest for today's Hotspotting podcast on the rather unique topic of airspace development. With over 23 years of experience in the industry, Warren is a visionary behind Buy Airspace and the Association of Rooftop and Airspace Development. His career has taken him from London to New York and finally to Australia, where he's actively participated in over 75 strata redevelopments. Warren has been recognised by pretty much all of the major media outlets here in Australia for this unique real estate opportunity that Warren's considered one of the leading experts in. Warren, welcome to the podcast. I'd love to know, how's 2024 kicked off for you?
Good, thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me. Look, it's going really well. Obviously, there's a huge focus on housing in regards to sale price as well as rental. So any kind of solution for that is, obviously well cared for. But the beauty with airspace, it's also the greenest housing solution for Australia. So look, it's really exciting to be able to share a little bit about it whenever opportunity I get.
Oh, terrific. Well, in my real estate career, Warren, I've been lucky enough to cover hundreds of different topics with experts in their field, but selling airspace is not one of them. So in simple terms, what does Buy Airspace actually do?
Great. Yes, so airspace is ultimately the space above a building to where the council allow you to build. But ultimately, when you buy property, the Latin term "osta prieste," meaning you own the airspace from heaven to hell. It's just that the government or the local council actually can tell you how much of that airspace you can actually build into, and they slowly but surely release the heights of these as cities progress. So what Buy Airspace is we trying to find buildings that haven't yet maxed out their whole height as well as floor space ratio. And ultimately to be able to build new homes on top of our existing shop tops, strata or commercial buildings. And so to create more homes in and around our hospitals and transportation hubs that we're doing at the present moment.
Amazing. So it's really the theory of we're building up instead of out.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. The government's trying to do as best they can. The beauty of strata anyway and rooftop is that they haven't even calculated the potential bedrooms that could be added by building up into those areas. When they've just done these latest releases, the TOD and the next two, just in New South Wales anyway, they've found about 126,000 potential upzone areas, where in fact with airspace, we can actually add another 100,000 additional homes above existing buildings.
Wow. Now, I understand this is quite a relatively new concept for Australia, but this has been happening all over the world for many years. You've obviously worked in other markets around the world. Could you give us some examples of where you've done this and where you've seen it be received well by local councils?
Yeah, so originally it was in London, then over to New York, and then here for the last 15 years trying to apply that airspace mythology. But to give you an example, I mean, if we want to get any guidance of how to manage density, I mean, we only have to look north, all the way through Europe and the US and obviously the UK, they've already done density. So we really don't need to recreate the wheel. And so France is actually quite popular with their rooftops. So ultimately, they were the first ones to really kind of live in the roof area. Predominantly around Paris, and then that particular rooftop has actually gone throughout the rest of the world. But to give you an example, in London from the year 2020, they've actually pre-approved 180,000 new airspace homes. Paris is 42,000, Barcelona 32,000, Boston 18,000, New York 6,000. So, and there's Munich and all these others. So ultimately what it is, it's where they're wanting to develop, but people don't want to leave.
Mm.
Ultimately they own an apartment or they own a shop top. They all understand the advantages of going up, but they don't want to leave their communities. They don't want to sell out. However, they do want to capture the uplift.
Mm. And how does the actual transaction take place? And it's not it must be creating new titles.
It is. Look, there's so many advantages, but there's no holding cost to airspace development. Ultimately, you already have an existing building owners, say a strata block. They already own the roof. The roof is seen as a liability because they have to replace it and repair it. And so ultimately, coming along, they can actually sell that particular airspace to someone else and create an additional lot. So they don't need to renew their strata title. If it's a block of 8, they would just make a 9th. But I mean, it has been done in Australia a bit, but just the challenges here are overwhelming against us because no one likes strata. It's kind of death, divorce, strata. And they certainly don't want to, potentially, work with their neighbors and find money to do these developments with people they don't know. So the UK and that have actually got a solution around that now.
Okay. Yeah, I'd imagine, dealing with strata is, it makes your pulse start to run 100 miles an hour just thinking of it. But give us an example of, let's say you had a case study there, 8, a small density, for an example, but it's got 8 strata titles within that property. What could, assuming that they're allowed to build upwards, what could be an example of the way that you could use that airspace?
Yeah, so look, of the 90,000 strata blocks in New South Wales or 340,000 in Australia, 92% of our strata buildings are these 8 to 12 lot blocks that are generally 3-story walk-ups, about 300 square meters, and predominantly this kind of pitched roof, tiled area.
Mm-hmm.
So where all these roofs are going to have to be replaced in the next 5 to 10 years because they're presently leaky or non-fire compliant, what we basically going out to strata owners and saying, well, instead of just repairing a liability, let's put a title around your rooftop. Let's actually create an asset from it and build a rooftop home on it that can ultimately be sold to pay for the capital works and all the repair and rejuvenation of that particular building. So the real focus of airspace is not to demolish, it's to provide Australia with another option where presently everyone generally knocks down, rebuilds bigger and sells to the highest bidder. Airspace actually allows us to create an asset that can then be sold to then rejuvenate the whole building. So none of the strata owners or shop owners, they don't have to move anywhere. They don't have to be disconnected from the community. They can add, tens or hundreds of square meters above them to actually fund their works.
So this could be further accommodation. It could be a rooftop. It could be a myriad of different things, but what it's doing is adding value to the existing strata. And my understanding is it doesn't cost them anything to do that. Is that correct?
Well, that's right. So here in Australia, anyone that has developed their own airspace, I'm thinking of one that's just completed now in Tamarama near Bondi. It took 12 years. And now the problem is because the strata has to go through a 14-stage process where they have to, in order to create that lot and get that approved by council and build it and then sell it on title, all the owners have to go through 14 different stages of approval. And of those 14 stages, they have to get a minimum of 75% of all the owners that agree. So a strata project can get all the way to the very end and you don't have the majority rule and it's busted.
Well, I mean, throughout that time, you could have changes in owners as well. And, one owner that's coming in might object to it.
Absolutely. So the solution, in order for them to have now done 180,000 in London is the owners ultimately tender off their airspace to airspace developers. These airspace developers come back to the owners and tell them what they would do with the space. They then negotiate a call options contract, and that call option contract allows the developer to go through and submit the DA to council to review. If council then approve the airspace development, then a lot is automatically created. It's been approved as part of the contract, and that allows the developer to actually get a construction loan to build the airspace, get it completed, sell it, and then they share the profits half.
Wow.
So this is ultimately
and
a
obviously
way to
that profit could go into further upkeep on that building.
Well, that's the advantage. Either the owners can pull that money out, they're going to get capital gains on it, or if they put that through the building is then repaired because of the requirement for the top roof, then a lot of that can be tax-free. But that's everyone needs to check out their own personal scenario. The other advantage, of course, is when people do spend $1 million on their building to put into the sinking fund, they have to do that with post-tax money. So they have to earn 1.4 million in total of all the owners to get taxed and then put that money in. Whereas in a developer coming through, they ultimately are putting that money in straight verbatim, and those funds aren't having to come from the actual owners themselves.
Interesting.
So look, it's the whole, I mean, the main thing is that strata, as it's been so complex, we've actually just tried to expedite it. And how we've done that is to get the owners out of the way early. And what I mean by that is, of these 14 different stages, let's all agree at the beginning, step one, and then the developer will do all the approvals for the next 13, and then the sale. So we just need to get the owners to vote on one occasion to say, this is what needs to go ahead. And so we don't have this huge expense of time to do it, as well as you're leaving it to developers that generally know what they're doing. They can fund it themselves. They've got the project management team to do it. And they will also be able to take the risk of whether or not that development gets approved by council or not. So the owners aren't in for anything. They don't need to pay for anything. All the risk needs to be on the developer.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, it'd have to appeal to a lot of developers now when they don't have a land component to consider as part of the cost.
Well, yeah, you've got the actual foundations are already there. They may need to be, ultimately supported, but your electricity, water, gas is already there. The roof just needs to be taken off. It's already, dark roofs are putting a lot of urban heat in. We're going to need to replace them. Let's replace them with a Tesla type styled roof that has all this great solar and got the rainwater capture. Someone can live there. Architecturally, it could be a beautiful thing for us.
Yeah. I really would recommend anybody listening to this podcast to jump on and have a look at your website so you can see some of these concepts. For anybody wanting to learn more about what Warren's talking about, you can go to buyairspace.com.au and check out some of the graphics that he's got on there, which are some great examples of how airspace could be utilized. So, Warren, one of the things that you talked about earlier in our chat today was the fact that this is a green initiative as well. Talk me through how that works.
Right. So presently, the first option that we generally all do is we find these buildings, the owners sell out, they move out, the building is collapsed, and we lose all that carbon neutral. So basically, what we're trying to do is to try and prevent buildings from actually being demolished, ultimately containing or locking in that carbon. We're then adding a further story to the roof, which is ultimately going to be a carbon neutral LTS, cross-laminated timber, which is also going to be a component of carbon. And then thirdly, we're preventing these larger, more carbon-intensive concrete blocks from being kind of built in its place. So it's green in the fact that it locks in all the carbon. It prevents all this other carbon from being done. And to give you an example, 40% of our carbon emissions comes from our construction industry. Yeah. Of that, 8% is purely from the manufacturing of cement. So if we can actually, into concrete, if we can actually prevent all of that from happening, we're actually going to be more carbon efficient moving forward.
Yeah, incredible. And, from a structural build perspective, you also, you were saying that it doesn't necessarily have to be, whilst it's constructed in the airspace, it could actually be an exoskeleton that could go around the existing building as well. So we're not adding further pressure to the existing building itself. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. So either internal or external. Imagine like a table top with four legs.
Mhm.
And put over the top of that particular building.
Yeah.
And then all the weight is put onto that tabletop itself. So, I mean, ultimately, these are, where most buildings can take up to about, 1 to 2 additional lightweight levels. Obviously, with this type of exoskeleton, you can actually go up to 40 levels. So it's just a way of actually protecting the original asset. And that could be someone that's a heritage building, or could be a shop that wants to be operating at the same time, or it could be a lower building where it's tenanted and they just want to build over the top of it without actually affecting the running of that particular asset.
Mm. Changing direction a little bit, Warren, you said that I know this is relatively new in Australian terms. How much of this are you seeing? We've got a huge housing crisis here currently. So the obvious would be to be creating further accommodation. But are you seeing much uplift in people wanting to do this for, recreational purposes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in Australia, we're all fixated by real estate. It's a 11 to 13 trillion dollar industry for us. It's pretty much our main asset besides mining. But look, the opportunity that's there is close on 100 million square meters of unused roof space that we've got. And in Europe, you'll notice they have these beautiful roof gardens, and they've actually made more recreational areas, shared areas. They actually use that particular space to the best of its ability, because it's the most overseen asset, really, of the building. You receive your daylight from it, you receive your water from it, you can grow things on it, and people can use it from a community aspect. But look, it's just a no-brainer. If you're wanting to use more urban infill, which is 2.5 times cheaper than urban sprawl, then airspace is a typical solution.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So now, Terry, obviously you've got Buy Airspace, but you're also the head of the Association for Rooftop Development, or for airspace developments as well. Tell me, what's the association entail?
Yes, so that's the Association of Rooftop and Airspace Development, so ARAD.au. It consists of 1,500 lawyers, well, predominantly architects, town planners, and engineers that are all very interested in getting involved in airspace. But it is not that it's new here, but it's obviously there's more emphasis of finding a housing solution for where we're at right now. So the association is ultimately all consultants that are within the building arena that want to ultimately focus on this new $200 billion industry.
Mm. And is the association getting a seat at the table with decision makers in relation to this?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, just this last couple of weeks, from local councils, we were with Liverpool Council speaking to the mayor just last week. He wants to provide airspace to his constituents find incentives in order to use this type of development from state government as well as federal. So primarily, I'm hoping to go and see Peter Dutton, the opposition leader, actually the end of this particular month. So they've for all different levels of government, they see this as a viable option. They just need to try and align it with what they're doing at the present moment.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. It would cut through a lot of red tape once you eventually get there, because, it's going to fast track. I mean, you've already got so much existing infrastructure already there. You're just adding on top of it, literally. But what would you say is the biggest objections you get with this type of product? And, what are those red tape items that you're actually the biggest challenges that you see in this market at the moment?
100%, the biggest challenge is knowledge.
Yeah.
It's getting it out there. Nearly every single person I speak to, and that's been for years, have not really ever heard of it, or never really contemplated it, or so it's an educational barrier, and that once people actually hear this as a potential solution, I mean, what I'm hearing back all the time, Tim, is that it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a great solution if people want to sell out and move away and demolish. Great, that we've been doing that really well. This is a second option where we've got all the NIMBYs that they're not wanting to go. That they don't want a developer to come along and ultimately put down a big concrete block next to them with limited parking, and the developer walks away with all the money. This is actually where the building owners are the ones that are making the money ultimately, and they're the ones that are crying at the present moment. We all are, about having enough money for general repairs and strata fees.
Yeah. Yeah, no, as I say, I think it's really obvious that there's a need for it. You're not reinventing the wheel. We've got plenty of examples of it working all around the world. So why couldn't it work here?
Well, absolutely. It's not, and look, it should pick up exponentially. I've been rattling this thing for years now, but I can honestly say the last 6 months has been faster than the last 15 years, without a doubt. So there's definitely a lot of interest in it, which is great. It's got a real lot of good feel factor. This is the green part of it. We're wanting to stop the heating. We don't want people to be kicked out or move out, but we still want to use that airspace. How do we do that? Okay, well, we get rid of something that's going to need to be replaced anyway. We just put it with something that's new, and can also accommodate people. So it's a situation that will work its way through the logic, I believe, anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to think you've been at it for 15 years and it's starting to really come to fruition now, I think the future is only positive for you, Warren.
For me and everybody else.
Yeah.
It's a great, a $200 billion industry. It's going to be able to basically fund the regeneration of all of our older buildings. So we're not knocking them down. We're keeping our heritage, as opposed to these huge concrete blocks that they're making now with all the defects. Off the plan is really scary. Why not buy something that's on plan? You can see it, you can look at it, you can touch it. There's less risk attached to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if anybody was interested in reaching out to you, Warren, and learning more about this, or maybe they're involved in strata that could be interested in having a further discussion around this, is your website the best way to get in contact with you?
Yes, absolutely. People that are in the industry, consultants, being a part of the association is brilliant. I'm literally do a monthly newsletter, which generally governmental persons we've met with, and where we're at with this whole process. We're ultimately trying to push for airspace development to become a CDC, so a compliant development. So imagine where you have that for a granny flat. You don't need to go through all the approvals. We're just wanting to put a granny flat on top of the roof. It's that simple. But my point is to try and take away, to get rid of the red tape. We're going to have to replace the roof anyway. If we're not adding much bulk and scale to the building, it should be a no-brainer. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, love the work that you're doing. And as I said, anybody who would be interested in having a further chat with Warren, you can find him on www.buyairspace.com.au. Warren, thanks so much for your time today. I think everyone learnt a lot.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity.
Good on you. We'll chat again soon. Thanks.